Good morning, everyone. Today, we are from Group 5. We'll talk about regional and social dialects.
Regional dialect. A regional dialect is a distinctive variety of a language spoken in a particular geographical area for many hundreds of years, as seen in differences in pronunciation and the choices and form of the word and syntax. There are four categories of regional variation. First, international varieties. Second, infranational or intracontinental variation. Third, isoglosses. And last, cross-continental variation dialect chains. International varieties show how different parts of the world use the same language differently in terms of the pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammatical structures. In the pronunciation, the different pronunciation under the international context shows how different countries pronounce the same word differently in the ears of others from different countries. For the example, when New Zealanders pronounce these words like bad and that, the British might hear it as a bad and that. And then, vocabulary differences, the different choice of words that are used in different parts of the world. For example, the word biscuit is used by the British and the word cookie is used by the American. And then grammar differences, the different grammatical structure used by speakers from different parts of the world. It can be indicates where you are from. For example, British use have and American use did. Then infranational or infracontinental variation. The word infra here is indicates within a country or continent. In the conversation below, what we are dealing here not just different accents, but with dialect differences within a country, since the distinguishing forms involve grammatical usages, lexical items, as well as pronunciation. Then isoglosses, the boundary lines that mark regional variation between areas where different vocabulary or grammatical usages or pronunciation occur. The picture here is the map of England show where different dialect words are used for the standard English word splinter. The boundary lines are called isoglosses.
Cross-continental variation dialect chains. A particular language used by people living in near-between villages that are usually linguistically similar. Although it won't be completely the same language, there will be similarity that is understandable. For example, Chinese language acts to unite the other dialects such as Mandarin, Cantonese, Hakka, teacher. Also, Chinese who speak one dialect necessarily understand other speakers of other dialects, although they may share similar linguistic features. Next, social variation. RV or a social accent. It is the accent of the best educated and the most prestigious member of English society. The label derived from the accent which was received at the royal court. The RP was promoted by the BBC for decades. It is a social accent, not a regional one, and it conceals a speaker regional origin. And this is the graphic of social variation. Next, social dialects. Social dialects linguistic varieties which are distinguishable by their vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation. It is also the speech of people from different social accents. Next, this is the part of social dialect. The first is standard English and the second is case dialect. Standard English is spoken with many different dialects. Linguistics from which are not a part of standard English is non-standard vernacular. What is a vernacular? Vernacular is variety of meaning which has something in common. Vernacular language are not standard language. Vernacular dialect features are not standard language features. For example, A. I've not washed the dishes yet today. B. I haven't washed the dishes yet today. Next, case dialect. Case dialect is an indication of their social background. For example, Javanese, Jawa Halus, and Jawa Kasar. And the example of case dialect, we choose India caste system, Brahmin and non-Brahmin. Brahmin is a spiritual leader, and then Kshatriya is the king of the caste system. Vaishya is a
And then next, we will talk about social class dialects. So, social class in here means the differences between people which are associated with differences in social prestige, wealth, and education. So, the social class or social status of someone will determine how they speak, the way they speak. There are various factors to determine social position, such as occupation, it's the what people do for a living, their job, and then place of residence where they live, and then education, income, racial origin, cultural background, caste, and etc. We can see the difference of social class dialects from a community to other community if we look at their vocabulary. For example, lawyers will not talk like burglar, even though both of them are defending a person or themselves. They will use or choose different words while they are speaking. Lawyer will speak more formally. In the bank office, we will see that the managers will not talk like the office cleaner. And then another example is in the 1950s in England, many pair of words were distinguished by the speech of upper class English people, or we can say it you speakers, and then the rest is non-you speaker. So you speakers here are people who came from noble position like the queen and then her generations and then wealthy people, etc. Meanwhile, non-you speakers are the regular citizen. For example, the you speakers will choose the word sitting room instead of lounge because lounge is used by the non-you speakers. Another example, the word lavatory is used by the you speakers, and then the word toilet is used by the non-you speakers, even though the meaning is the same. Second, We can see the difference of social class dialects from their pronunciation. For example, the H sound dropping, like in the word house. For some group of people, they will pronounce house with the sound H, house, and the other people, other community will say it house, and house. From the data, we could see that the higher social groups, the lower they do the H dropping. So from the graphic, number one is the highest social group, and then they use less H dropping. And then in number five, they are the lowest social groups and they do a lot of H dropping. This data is obtained from Norwich and West Yorkshire. However, it is different from New York City. In New York, people who drop the H sound usually comes from the higher social levels or social group. For people in New York, they drop the H sound to show their identity as New Yorkers. So they are proud to drop the H sound. So it's different. In Norwich and West Yorkshire, the H dropping comes from the lower social groups. Meanwhile, in New York, H dropping is comes from the higher social group. And then in some countries like Britain, Australia, and New Zealand, the pronunciation of ing can be different from high social group and lower social group. So the higher social group will say ing and the lower social group will say in, like sleeping, swimming. Next is the use of post-vocalic or R sound, like in the words car, card, for, and form. In New York City, pronouncing R is generally considered prestigious. Meanwhile, in England, it is not. And the last one is the same vowels, like in New Zealand. It is mentioned in example 15. Sir, what is happening to the humble letter I in New Zealandese? In many mouths, him becomes hum, Jim becomes Jim, and till is till. I overheard a young girl telling her friend on the phone that she had been a doctor and had to take 6 different pills a day. After 4 repetitions, she had to spell it to be understood. So, from this example, we could see that people from New Zealand usually use the swa, like in every most every vowel.
Okay, hello everyone. Right now we will discuss about grammatical patterns. Uh, I give you an example before we discuss about this pattern. So, Bina is 8 years old and she is telling a visitor the story of a film she has seen. And then these little flies went to go and they made a house by themselves. And this big fly was playing his guitar. He play and play. Then the little flies was making the house, and then the flies sew the leaves up all together. This is an extract from a recorded interview. Vina was one of 80 New Zealand children who were recorded telling the story of a film they had seen. As the extract shows, this was a good way of providing a natural context for the children to use a large number of past tense forms of verbs. It was then possible to compare the proportion of standard verbs from in the speech of children from different social groups. On average, it was found that children from lower class families use more vernacular verbs from that than children from middle class families. So this pattern has been noted for a variety of grammatical variables. Here are some examples of standard and vernacular grammatical forms which have been identified in several English-speaking communities. Oh, the form from past tense forms: I finished that book yesterday, and then I finished that book yesterday. And the present tense verb form: Rose walks to school every day, and Rose walked to school every day. And negative forms: nobody wants any chips, and nobody don't want no chips. And ain't Jimmy isn't stupid. Jim ain't stupid. As with pronunciation, there is a clear pattern to relationship between the grammatical speech from the social group who use them. And the higher social group use more of the standard grammatical form and fewer instances of the vernacular or non-standard form, with the grammatical pattern illustrated in Figure 6.5. And the third person singular form of the present tense singular verb. For example, standard she walks versus vernacular she walk. And there is a sharp distinction between up middle class groups and the lower class groups. Sociolinguistics describe this pattern as sharp stratification. So, people are often more aware of social stigma in relation to vernacular grammatical forms, and is reflected in the lower incidence, both in a variety of US English spoken in Detroit and in a variety of British English spoken in Norwich. And sentence 6 in the list illustrates a pattern of negation, which sometimes called negative concord or multiple negation, where standard English allows only one negative in each clause. Most vernacular dialects can have two or more. In some dialects, every possible form which can be negated is negated. An adolescent gang member in New York produced the following, like this. In this is the vernacular version tense forms and third person singular she block in Norwich and Detroit. Uh, it ain't no cat and can't get it no cool. And then we will discuss about a note about methodology. I'll give you an example. My friend Terry taught social linguistics at New Zealand University. He described to his students how I and my colleagues, Alan Bell and Mary Boyce, designed our sample for the Wellington Social Dialect Survey by establishing a quota of 5 cells for each of our target group: young Pakeha women and middle-aged Maori men, and so on. After the exams, he rang to tell me that some of these students had clearly misunderstood our method of collecting data. In their exams answer they described how we had put people and before interviewing them. This is a map of England showing distance between London and other cities. This term cells is used to describe the box in a diagram which indicate the target number for each group in ensemble. Our group was in a minimum of 5 people in each box or cell in the diagram to represent each group, including women and men. 3 age group and 2 ethnic group Maori and Pakeha and 2 social groups. We managed to reach our target but not by capturing people and putting them in cells till they agreed to be interviewed. In table 6.4, stretch a sample of 20 people divided by age and gender with quota of 5 people per cell. And then uh, collecting a good quality social dialect data requires considerable skill. Some of challenge and pitfall which face the social dialectologists will emerge during the discussion in the next few chapters. In these chapters, we have mentioned the use of rapid and anonymous surveys as one useful technique of collecting a lot of data very quickly. Lebov used this method when he asked, "Where are the women's shoes?" at the New York department store. Another example is the use of street to ask people to pronounce certain words, ideally presenting them in writing or visual from the prevent possible bias from the interviewer's pronunciation. This method allows the researchers to assess features of the speech of a large number of people in a relatively short time and can provide interesting clues about what is worth studying in more detail. But it has obvious limitations, though patterns of gender and age and sometimes ethnic variation can be detected using this approach, since we can usually guess these features when we meet someone. It is harder to be sure about the social background of speakers when no social information is collected from them. And, of course, the data is limited in quantity and style. A sociolinguistic interview with Adams to elicit a range of style as well as collection background information from the interview is thus much more useful. This is by far the most widespread method of collecting social dialect data. But of course, it is much more time consuming and thus expensive. Okay, thank you.